Good morning, everybody. We're going to let everybody join, give it another minute or so, and then we'll get started. Okay, good morning, everybody. I still see people are entering the webinar room and are joining, but we're going to kick things off for our COVID-19 and technology webinar. We've got a big turnout. Hundreds of participants have signed up, so thank you all very much for your time in this morning and for joining us in this discussion. We hope it's very productive for you guys. I'm your host today. My name is Peter Pietkiewicz. I'm the CEO and founder of Concierge Plus. I'll get into a little bit about our company shortly. I'm joined today by two other panelists, Ben Zelikovic, who's the co-founder of GetQuota. They help condo associations achieve quorum, deal with proxies, electronic voting, and recently they've launched a virtual meeting service. And Fiona Di Domenico, who is a senior vice president at Castle Group. They're a property management company based out of Florida and Texas. And they'll be sharing some of the best practices from a property management perspective of how they're dealing with COVID, what they're seeing in the field, and other useful information in that category. Quick housekeeping notes on the webinar itself. We're expecting the webinar portion to last about 45 minutes. We'll each go through all of our content, and then there'll be a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. Typically down at the bottom of your Zoom window, there should be a QA button. If you've got a question at any time throughout the webinar for any of the panelists or about any of these topics, just feel free to click on that, type in your question. That'll go up on a list for all the panelists to see. And then when we get to the Q&A session at the end, we'll be going through as many of those questions as possible. Again, there's a very large turnout. So if we don't get to your question today, what we'll do is we'll follow up with an email response to you. And as well, Concierge Plus will be sharing a link to a recording of this webinar so you can review any of the content and share it with colleagues and all of that kind of good stuff. You'll expect to receive an email after the webinar with that. All right, so let's kick things off. So just very high level who we are. So we are a resident experience management platform. I started Concierge Plus about 20 years ago when I bought my first condo, and ever since then I've scaled it with a mission to provide as many great resident experiences with property managers as possible. And that's really where we focus on leveraging technology to help property managers deliver those excellent resident experiences. We've also been featured in lots of industry publications. We attend trade events throughout North America, so you may have seen us at one or more of those. And we work with thousands of property managers, both in North America and in many countries globally. And we're very proud of the platform that we've built that helps support property managers and condo associations in that goal. So the really big thing that I want to talk to you about today, and really kind of the big headline here, technology is a necessity. I think prior to the pandemic, a lot of condo associations were a little bit slow or not really sure why they needed to have a digital transformation in their community. But the COVID-19 situation has really driven condos and associations to an understanding of why technology and why effective technology in their community is something that's critical. We've been seeing a huge uptick in folks coming to us and reaching out to us for help and trying to get on board and get their communities the right set of technological tools during this pandemic to fill the technological gap that they already have in their association. And I think the reality is that if as an association you don't start leveraging the right kind of technology now, you will be left in the dark ages. This is something that is critical. You've got to be prepared to offer the right critical services, leveraging technology in an easy and an effective way to be able to continue the operation of your community, not only through a situation like COVID-19, but through some others that we'll get into as well. So this isn't, the way that we're approaching this is not an option anymore. This is a requirement. It's cost of entry to have technology for resident experience management. And situations like COVID-19 have basically demonstrated that a lot of condo associations have been caught off guard. People have not been expecting this kind of pandemic to unfold, and now a lot of people are scrambling to try to understand how they can introduce technology to help deal with the changes in the reality of the day-to-day operations and the impact that it's having on residents. And one of the biggest learning aspects I think that people have taken away from this is you've got to be cloud-based for this, right? So you've got to be leveraging technology that allows not only the management to be offsite, but allows residents to be able to interact with any of the staff or the management of the association contactless way. Leveraging that kind of contactless interaction is critical in a time like this. We've all seen in the news and hopefully in our local communities how social distancing, limiting physical interactions, has been helping populations get through situations like COVID. And where all of these people live, in the associations that you guys manage and the associations that, if you're on the board, that you guys live in, there's a further desire to extend that limiting of physical interaction by all of the residents, right? So people want to make sure that they're feeling safe and comfortable in their homes, and that they're able to still have day-to-day life continue as much as possible, but taking precautions where they can. And you've got to also remember that this isn't just about COVID-19. So as I was saying, COVID-19 is affecting all of us, right? But there are a lot of urgent situations that come up on a regular basis, everything from elevator outages and water shutoffs, all the way to other kinds of natural disasters like hurricanes and floods and things like that. And you've got to be able to, as a condo association, you've got to be able to adapt to those requirements and be able to not only keep residents and owners updated on what's happening, but in many of these cases, continue the operation of the community and a lot of the facilities that you guys have during these difficult situations. I think that the other thing to keep in mind and to understand during difficult times like this is that the people are critical. So property managers are being seen as trusted advisors in these situations. Residents are turning to property managers and are expecting to receive relevant communication that can help them make decisions on what to do. And often, especially with situations like this, you're dealing with decisions that have to be made that potentially can affect the health or well-being of a resident. So as a property manager, you've got to make sure that you've increased the amount of transparency and you're engaging with your community through effective, inclusive, and consistent communication. Part of that means you've got to be proactive. So you've got to, you can't be waiting for a situation to be developing in your community. You have to be out front of these things, and you have to be proactively communicating with residents to let them know the important information that they need to understand. What that's going to do for you is that's going to build confidence with your residents and with your board if you're a property manager. What you want to have happen is at the end of this kind of situation, or at the end of any of these kinds of incidents that may happen in a community from time to time, you want to come out of that having built confidence with the residents and confidence in the community. You want to come out on top of this this scenario. And again, part of that means being proactive, because that's going to lead to better customer service. It's going to lead to increased confidence from your residents. And there's just no way that you can do that without leveraging automation and technology. It would be extremely laborious and time-consuming to try to do that without the right suite of technology. So as we get into the technology piece in a moment, and what can you actually do about this, I just want to quickly recap some of the challenges that COVID-19 is creating for condos and for HOAs. You've got a whole wide range of scenarios, right? So you've got residents that are quarantined in their units or are self-isolating, maybe because they're infected, they've returned from a foreign destination and by law have to remain inside their unit. I mean, these are folks in certain situations that can't leave to go get the mail, can't leave to throw out the garbage, they can't go to the corner store, they can't do any of these things. And of course, you've got all that all the way down to the folks that are just choosing to socially distance themselves. And those folks are basically just, they're the ones that are listening to the advice and that are being encouraged to stay inside their homes, except for dealing with critical jobs and tasks, and are trying to follow that as much as possible. This is hugely challenging in a community because there are all kinds of third parties typically in a community. First, you have, in addition to the residents, the management, you've got contractors, you've got vendors, you've got all of these different kinds of people that by their nature demand physical interaction. So you're also then dealing with the fact that property managers, a lot of them are working remotely because the management office is closed. Other non-essential staff have also been asked to work remotely from home quite often. So this means that in all these difficult situations, on top of everything else, a resident can't physically get a hold of a property manager and can't get that physical reassurance from the property manager that things are going to be okay, or what's happening with a particular part of the association or a facility in the building. And then to layer on top of that, because everyone's trying to stay home and not go out, the amount of online shopping and general deliveries that are coming into condos and associations has really increased, right? So you've got to make sure that your condo association has found a way to help residents with their desire not to own homes and manage the communication and the delivery of those items to those residents. You're often talking about perishable items, medicine, food, important documents that are arriving. These are not things that can often be sitting around for hours on some pile of packages while you're trying to figure out how to notify residents. You've got to be able to quickly get through and residents know that their items have arrived. Okay, so what do we do about this, right? So there are a lot of different options for how an association could deal with this. I'm going to go over 5 that our customers are seeing as the most relevant in this time. So the first one is a pretty obvious one. It's announcements, and this is basically keeping residents informed about what's happening in the community. This is cost of entry. You've got to find a way to reach residents in an effective way. So this isn't just about putting a notice up in an elevator or in a mail room or in the lobby or something like that. It's certainly not around printing. It's certainly not about printing hundreds of copies of a note and passing it around door to door. You've got to be emailing, you've got to be texting, and you've got to be calling residents. There are a lot of older residents, a lot of residents that are not as tech savvy. They are going to want to receive the information via phone call because they may not be at their smartphone or their computer, or may not even have a smartphone in time to check the information. So you've got to have a facility to communicate that information to residents in a way that they want to receive it. On top of that, you also want to make sure that you're understanding who's actually gotten the information. So just sending out an email blast, for example, and CCing everybody or BCCing everybody, not helpful, because you don't know who's actually gotten that message, what emails have bounced, what's sitting unread, et cetera, et cetera. You've got to be able to understand who's read and who's understood each message by all of the vehicles. but more importantly, who hasn't, so that you know that, hey, there's that older resident that I've got to make sure I inform them manually or take that extra step to make sure that they're understanding the situation or the message that I'm trying to communicate. And the last part of this is digital display screens, right? So if your building has an area where digital display screens can be made useful inside an elevator, in a mailroom, in the lobby, and anything like that, putting that message up in another place where people can see your communication, and one more set of places for eyes on your message. Deliveries. So I just mentioned a minute ago how there's obviously an increase in the amount of deliveries that are coming through a condo. So with online shopping skyrocketing, you've got to have a way to take all those packages and quickly process them through a system that will not only log the packages, but also notify that resident. That resident might be home, they might be out at a critical job that they're working, they might be out getting groceries, medicine, anything like that, at a store. You've got to be able to let them know that they can pick up that package, or that the package will be dropped off for them as quickly as possible. And you've got to keep a permanent, easy to access digital record. It's you know, as a side note, we still see a lot of associations that are using binders and getting people to sign on a package log. It's very difficult to quickly get to the right item on that log and have somebody pick up their packages and process that request when you're having to do it manually. So doing it digitally with the right hardware, like a digital signature pad, and notifications to their cell phones, to their emails, to their phones, is absolutely critical. So discussion forums. With residents a lot more time on their hands, because a lot of them are staying home, a lot of them also want to feel more connected to their communities, and they're trying to figure out how to talk to their neighbors in situations where otherwise they might not have done that in the past. So one of the things you want to do is you want to provide, as an association, a controlled way of doing that. You want to get this out of social media where somebody can hide behind, you know, some Facebook login or a fake name or something like that. And you want to provide residents with a controlled area where they can have their discussions. What that's going to do is that's going to make sure only valid residents are participating in the discussions. So as soon as you move out, your account gets closed and you're off the forum. And as I mentioned, there's no anonymization, right? So if residents know that at least their first name is going to be displayed there, and there is a way to track back by the management who actually posted a comment, you're going to see a lot more collaborative and a lot more productive nature of the discussions that are happening in your community. Service requests. So look, whether there's COVID-19 or a flood or something else, the regular stuff that happens in an association is still going to keep happening, right? There's going to be burnt out light bulbs, broken doors, broken windows, landscaping issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You need to stop residents from coming to the front desk or trying to reach you in the management office, especially if you're not there. And you've got to get these requests out of your voicemail, out of your email, out of phone calls to the management office or the front desk. You have to leverage technology that will allow you to put up a form for a resident to fill out with all of the details that you need to collect to process their request promptly and accurately. And as part of that, you have to leverage workflow technology. You're going to be inundated with all kinds of requests, whether it's in your email or in an online form. And you have to have technology that will help you get through that as easily as possible. So the heavy lifting of assigning tickets to the correct person in your staff, on your staff. For example, maintenance issues go to the superintendent or the maintenance team. Back office issues could go to the property management office or something like that. All of that stuff has to be programmed in and built into the workflow handling to make life easier for you as a property manager. Otherwise, again, you're just going to be, overflowing with things to deal with, on top of having to deal with the fact that you're probably working remotely or working from home and trying to figure out how to deal with that situation. And last, amenity booking. So a lot of associations and a lot of buildings have different amenities: guest suites, party rooms, clubhouses, barbecue areas, whatever the case may be. In many cases, people have paid to use those, to make a booking to use those facilities. I could have booked a guest room for 3 months from now for for a friend to be staying at. When there's a situation when those amenities need to be shut down, you got to do two things. One, you've got to communicate to residents very easily that certain amenities are not available, and they need to know that on an active basis. Putting that online will allow them to access a calendar and see, oh, look, we're closed off until May 31st, and so they'll understand that they can't make a booking until then. For the residents, the second thing is for the residents that have already made a booking, including when payments have been made, you've got to just find a way to essentially cancel those reservations and communicate that to the residents as easily as possible. So, closing an amenity out and having all of the bookings that were made canceled automatically with a communication back to residents. All the money goes back on their credit cards. All of that stuff is literally done with just a couple of clicks. That's a very proactive way that you can handle dealing with amenity bookings and the closure of certain facilities in your condo and association. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our next panelist, Ben Zelikovitz from GetQuota, and he's going to talk to you guys about virtual meetings.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Can I just get a quick thumbs up from Peter and JJ if my screen is showing properly? Very good. So hello, everybody. My name is Ben Zelikovitz. I used to think my last name was difficult to pronounce. That is until I met Peter. I am one of the founders of GetQuota. So I'd like to thank Peter for inviting me to join the webinar today. Concierge Plus is a company that GetQuota works very closely with. And they've certainly established themselves as the market standard for managing ongoing day-to-day challenges facing communities. So we're going to shift gears a little bit for our segment and focus on how technology can help with the governance challenges that are being created by the COVID pandemic. So I guess as a starting point, it's safe to say we're all unsure when the current social distancing measures will be lifted. And until then, traditional owner meetings will not take place. And we're also equally unsure of what the world will be like after social distancing measures have been relaxed. So to give some context into my perspective, here's just a very, very brief overview of GetQuota and the services we provide. We're an electronic voting and governance communication service that help our clients have successful owner meetings, increase owner participation, and reduce printing and mailing costs. We also launched a new service, which I'll touch upon very briefly towards the end of my segment. That's called hosted virtual owner meetings. And just as a quick background, my partners and I started GetQuota about 5 years ago after we became sort of embroiled in a lawsuit and a requisition or recall of the existing board of directors. So after about 4 or 5 years managing as a board of director, my business partners and I created the GetQuota. So over the course of the segment here, and before I go any further, I just want to remind you guys that if you have any questions, there's a button right down there on the bottom of your screen for Q&A. So if you have questions of Peter, you have questions of Fiona or myself, please key them in right down there and we'll do our very best to get to them. So over the course of my segment, we're going to talk to you about electronic voting and proxies, variations of electronic proxies and voting, benefits, what a virtual meeting is, benefits of virtual meetings, best practices, and some other tips to consider for virtual meetings. So let's get right into it. Electronic voting, what is it? Well, there are actually 3 types of electronic votes that are available out in the market. First, we have the electronic proxy, very popular in certain jurisdictions, but limited in use in other jurisdictions. A proxy, as we all know, is completed and signed by a proxy appointee and gives a proxy holder certain voting powers during an owner meeting. And there are a variety of different types of proxies. There's a general proxy, a limited proxy, a proxy for quorum, and in the state of Texas, for example, you have something called an absentee ballot. So there's a lot of variation, and different proxies can be used differently based on what state or province you may live in. Next, you have the advanced electronic vote, which is a vote cast directly by an owner or member in advance of the meeting. Typically, it's a secret ballot, and these votes generally also count towards quorum. Now, the critical point to consider for both the electronic proxy and the advanced electronic vote is that they are both completed prior to the commencement of an owner meeting. By comparison, the third option that you'll see on your slide right now is a real-time vote. And this is available to communities that are doing virtual meetings or in-person meetings with a virtual component. And a real-time vote is cast directly by an owner or member, and it is cast during the meeting. So what are some benefits of using electronic voting? The first is that you ensure quorum is reached. With owners and members can easily submit a proxy or an electronic vote for quorum purposes. So over the 1,000 AGMs that GetQuorum serviced in 2019, we missed quorum 0 times. Increased participation from members. With more participation, you get a greater likelihood of reaching your goals, whether you're going for material alterations, simple election of directors, maybe passing bylaws, rule changes, document updates, whatever it is your goals may be, using electronic voting is the best way to get you there if you need to have support from your ownership group. Reducing printing and mailing costs by providing a simple way for owners or members to opt into receiving electronic communication, and this does vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. You will be reducing the amount of printing and mailing required, not just for your owner meeting, but for all corporate communications going forward. For example, you want to use Concierge Plus to distribute more and more of your governance notices. You have to have people to have your owner group consent to doing so. Electronic voting platforms can typically help you do that. And lastly, safety and security of your vote. With cryptographic security, IP tracking, and a myriad of other security measures, electronic voting is far more secure than paper-based ballots and proxies. As well, electronic voting, when and if needed, is completely auditable retroactively. So let's look really quickly at some of the things that communities that have used electronic voting have been able to achieve. So here's a beautiful property in South Beach, Miami, Mirador 1000. They were an older but beautiful property on the water, but their lobby and their pool deck needed an overhaul, but they were struggling to get owner turnout required to approve the material alterations. After they decided to embrace electronic voting, they received 50% support for their material alterations before the meeting on electronic votes alone. So they knew that their goals were met before they even held their meeting. Then we have the Gooderham in the east side of Toronto. They had an unoccupied superintendent suite. It was just sitting there. And so with 328 units using electronic voting, they were able to achieve the 80% approval required to repurpose that super suite and turn it into a premium rental guest suite. So they went from having a basically a cost center where they're spending and having to maintain a super suite that is not being occupied to having a premium guest suite that now is revenue generating for the community. Okay, so I think that we've established that using technology before the meeting can help you reach your goal. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic and social distancing measures, traditional in-person meetings are not possible for the foreseeable future. What's more, even if and when the social distancing measures are relaxed, are owners going to want to attend large in-person meetings again? I don't know the answer to that. What we do know is that many of our clients have reached out to GetQuorum to see if there's something that they can do now. Clients of ours that have to pass borrowing approvals, insurance bylaws, things that are urgent and cannot wait, they need another option in the short term. That option is a virtual meeting. So let's look at that and how it can benefit your community. It may seem obvious, but a virtual meeting is one that takes place using electronic means. The critical point being that owners and members can participate in the owner meeting as if they were there in person. And there are 2 types of virtual meetings to consider. Virtual only, which is essentially the only option available while social distancing measures are being enforced, is held exclusively online. So the panelists, the board, the auditor, the lawyer, everybody is in their home office and broadcasting much like we are today. Perhaps in the future, when social distancing measures are relaxed, we'll see more of what we call a hybrid meeting, where an in-person meeting is held, but a virtual stream with online participation is also offered. And this is a way that you can reduce the overall footprint of your meeting while still capturing participation from as many of your owners as possible. Some of the benefits of holding virtual meetings is better accessibility. Owners can access the meeting from anywhere in the world. All they need is a device and an internet connection. So if you're down in Florida, even your snowbirds can participate when they're not down there. increased participation. Along with more accessibility comes more participation, which gives our clients a better chance of reaching.
Oh, it looks like Ben has stopped himself there.
Your panelists can participate from the comfort of their own home. And then lastly, as we are having this discussion due to the COVID-19 pandemic, virtual meetings are the only way to hold a valid owner meeting while adhering to mandatory and recommended social distancing measures. So what are some things to consider and best practices if you're going to hold an owner meeting? First of all, you have to communicate it to your owners. Let them know that you've made the decision to go virtual and explain why. The most important of the best practices, in my opinion here, is conducting a dress rehearsal. Review the meeting agenda and ensure that your virtual meeting solution is able to support the various procedures you'll be completing. Are there going to be motions, resolutions, bylaws? What sort of discussions and what sort of interaction do you need with your members during the meeting? Practice it and ensure that the webinar technology can support that. It also gives hosts and speakers the ability to familiarize themselves with the technology so that they're not embarrassing themselves live and during the meeting. Question and answer management. Carefully plan and strategize how you're going to manage question and answers. Encourage owners to submit their questions in advance of the meeting. Review and determine which answers will be discussed live and which will be responded to independently. From there, you may want to have a dedicated resource, like for example, we would have today, that will moderate the questions that are being submitted live and during the meeting. For larger communities with hundreds of owners, this is certainly very important. Then you've got voting governance. And I suppose the best part of holding virtual meetings is you're not going to have to deal with paper proxies and ballots, but there are going to be other complications. So for virtual owner meetings, you have to plan on how to ensure that advanced voting, whether it's via a proxy or an advanced ballot, how they're properly accounted for, and ensure that you have a system to ensure that proxy holders are given the appropriate number of ballots for each matter of business. Then lastly, tech support and moderation. Using software like Zoom today, it's not rocket scientist, but it isn't a walk in the park either. With an array of options that are available to you that can impact the experience of participants, it's wise to have a dedicated resource manage the webinar so that speakers and hosts are not worrying about it. Rather, they're worried on delivering a good, solid meeting. So let's talk a little bit more about the capabilities of webcasting technologies. Right now, we are using Zoom. There's GoToWebinar, there's WebEx, there's all sorts of them out there in the market, and they all have certain commonalities. So what we're going to do here is we're going to walk through the common functionalities that you'll find with webinar technologies, and we'll start to map them over to processes that you would expect to see during an owner meeting. So first of all, the participant types. There are generally speaking 3 participant types at an owner meeting, each with specific permissions that define what they can and cannot do during the meeting. Starting with the hosts. They run and have full control over the meeting. That would be myself, Fiona, Peter, and JJ behind the scene. Hosts can share screens, mute and unmute specific people, and have advanced controls to moderate the meeting. This is the level of control that you need for, at the very least, your chairperson. Next, you have your speakers, your auditors, your lawyers, board presidents, or other invited guests that may be speaking during a designated period of time. And then lastly, you have attendees, which is everybody else. These are the owners, shareholders, members, candidates for elections, or just observers. Oops, skip the slide there. All right, there we go. Audience controls. This allows a chairperson or a host to control who can speak at a given period of time. They are potentially one of the most important requirements to analyze for webinar software that you're looking at to ensure that you can control a virtual owner meeting. Generally, all participants will be muted by default, so there really is no way for someone to interrupt the speaker. I think we've all been in owner meetings where proceedings get held up, and as a last resort, audience controls can be used to allow a meeting to continue. Audience controls are only available to hosts and the chairperson. Attendees, generally speaking, cannot enable themselves to speak. They can't unmute themselves. They cannot turn on their own video, and they cannot see who else is on the meeting. Hand raising. Virtual hand raising is common and necessary function for most owner meetings. Attendees can raise their hand via a press of the button on their screen. You guys can probably do it down at the bottom there. Only a chair can raise their hands. This is useful for things like motions from the floor, a show of hands after a motion, registering for objections. You may even want to use the hand raising to unmute certain attendees during question and answer so that they can speak. Polling is another common feature. It's useful for, well, polling, surveys, engaging the support for things that we would consider to be not substantive matters, which would require an auditable secure vote. Polls can also be another way to do a show of hands. The infamous chat and QA. We, generally speaking, for hosted virtual owner meetings, recommend that the chat be disabled. Generally not a good idea, as Peter mentioned also for your discussion forums on Concierge Plus, but generally speaking, it's not a good idea to allow public chats. It can become overwhelming, disruptive, and heaven forbid you have an owner that isn't being polite and courteous in a chat room. It can get very disruptive. So by comparison, the QA feature is quite useful. It allows the attendees to ask questions directly to the hosts. The host can respond privately, they can respond openly, and they can track who asked the question and follow up with them afterwards. Real-time voting. So not to be confused with polling, which we discussed a couple moments ago. It's also not to be confused with advanced electronic ballots or voting. Real-time voting is used when you're voting on substantive matters. You need to have a system that is secure and auditable. Results of real-time votes need to be combined with votes that have been received before the meeting, so your proxies and your ballots. Secure voting, which we're suggesting here, is typically not part of webcast software. They are two separate softwares built for specific purposes. So this is an example of where you might want to combine webcasting software with GetQuota's voting platform. Okay, some other procedures to bear in mind. The chair should allow only one person at a time to speak, making sure everyone else is muted. Handling questions in real time can get overwhelming. Encourage the questions to be asked ahead of time. If you're going to be using chat, do it sparingly and set so attendees can only chat with the hosts. And for attendees to participate, most software will require them to go online. So you cannot simply just dial in. If you dial in only, you can hear things, but you may not be able to raise your hand. You may not be able to participate in electronic votes, polls, surveys, things of that nature. And lastly, your meeting chair should be familiar with the software and its controls to ensure things go well. Some additional thoughts as we're wrapping this up is that, generally speaking, despite all of the features we've showed you, virtual meeting technology will inevitably require you to adapt your processes to fit within the technological boundaries. Let me rephrase that. If you're going to host a virtual meeting, you have to be open-minded and you have to look at what you are trying to achieve, what your procedures are, and how the technology can support it. If your expectation is that you're going to host a virtual owner meeting and that it will work exactly as an in-person meeting, you may find this to be a challenge. You need to adapt and compromise to the capabilities that are offered on the webcasting software. And then there are a few other considerations with how to manage your Q&A, owner and member speaking opportunities, and ensuring that proxies and advanced ballots all work in conjunction with any real-time voting that you may be offering. Moving on to legal considerations. And so I'm not a lawyer, we're a software company. So ultimately the determination of whether or not virtual meetings are something that is suitable for your community will be up to you, your board, and your lawyers. That said, we've had many conversations with lawyers in various jurisdictions, and we've made the following observations. First, the question as to whether or not you may hold a virtual meeting is answered by looking at the statutes and articles of incorporation or bylaws that govern your community. Next, you want to seek out legal advice from your own legal counsel to decide if this is possible. Electronic voting, independent of the virtual meeting, is generally speaking expressly permitted or requires a bylaw. If you have any questions about this based on whatever province or state or country you may live in, we're very happy to help you. Ultimately though, your lawyer is going to be the best place to get guidance on that. Having said all that, in the COVID-19 world, the same rules do not necessarily apply. For example, in the state of Florida, the governor there recently declared a state of emergency, and this would allow communities to host virtual AGMs right now in order to address needs that may be urgent and pressing. And then lastly, different clients will use our technology in different ways. So there are a number of procedural variations that our platform can accommodate to ensure that clients can be confident that they're conducting a meeting that is in compliance with their governing statutes and bylaws. All to say, if you have any questions about all of this, give us a call and we're happy to work through it with you. So last couple slides here. Obviously, there will be life after COVID-19. It may be a little different than it was before. Social distancing measures will eventually be eased. Owners and members may continue, though, to be wary about attending large in-person gatherings for the foreseeable future. At the same time, I don't think anybody here on this call thinks that the condo industry was and is ready to transition directly to virtual meetings. If we had to guess, we think that there will be more emphasis on allowing for participation without live in-person attendance required. That means having in-person meetings, but also offering virtual stream and online participation. And for communities that perhaps aren't ready to take that step, we foresee greater emphasis on advanced participation via proxy or electronic balloting. In either circumstance, whether you're going to offer a virtual component to your web meeting or electronic voting, reducing the overall footprint by reducing unnecessary in-person attendance by offering alternatives will become a best practice if it isn't already. So lastly, just before we move on to Fiona, I just want to let you guys know about our new service that we developed in response to the COVID pandemic. And this is a hosted virtual owner meeting service. I think, though, that if you look at what we've gone through, it's pretty clear that if you wanted to host a virtual owner meeting yourself, you could probably do so. However, what we've heard from our clients is that they don't have the resources or the time or the capability to do it. So our hosted owner meeting service is designed to be a turnkey solution. The idea being that if the board wants to proceed with a virtual meeting, all they would need to do is show up with their laptops and work with GetQuota to provide basically everything that we've discussed. If you have any questions, you can submit it in the box down here. You can reach out to me on my email, benz@getquorum. And from now, I'll turn things over to Fiona. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen here so you can okay, and if I can get a heads up from someone on my team to say you can see my screen, that would be fantastic. All right, thanks, JJ. So good morning, everybody. My name is Fiona DiDomenico, and I am the Senior Vice President with Castle Group. And bear with me 1 second. Okay, so Castle Group, we are based in Florida. We are a privately owned property management firm. We have partnered with over 300 associations in Florida and in Texas. And we specialize in communities like yours where there are amenities on site. We do both tower associations and homeowners associations. Many of our associations have large scale amenities. So they've got pools, they've got tennis courts, they've got restaurants, they have everything under the sun. We have about 1,700 teammates and different layers of support. So we've got a great HR team who have been highly engaged with all of this COVID pandemic going on, a full accounting team and lifestyle services team, as well as a whole food and beverage team. And on the team, I'm very proud to say we have many CPAs. We've got a VP of engineering to help out our sites. We have a director of food and beverage. So we have lots of support for all of our associations. We like to say at Castle that we have gathered the best in the industry. So the best people, the best systems, and the best technology. And all of those things combined enable us to deliver to our residents what we like to call royal service. So technology, obviously, as we've been talking about today, has been critical, and Castle has been using technology for many years. It has become obviously even more important in this COVID age. We do have an industry-leading technology platform. We've got a customizable and open API. We have a fully staffed information technology team who helps guide the property managers and the boards at the sites, and a state-of-the-art call center. One of the applications that we do use is something called Grid Vendor or Smart Vendor, which is something that the property managers can use on site. For example, if you were needing to do a large-scale roofing project, or you needed to find a vendor for a repiping project perhaps, your property manager can go in, they would type in their zip code or their postal code, and up would come a list of pre-vetted vendors that would have verification of license, insurance. Other property managers that have used them will have gone in and provided some information on that vendor. We also have platforms for associations to do all of their signing of checks all online. So the actual board member would have a login to what we call Castle Click. No social distancing needs to be worried in that circumstance. It can all be done remotely. We also have an app which we call Drawbridge, which our residents can use. They can submit work orders, they can do check their balance on their accounts, etc., etc. So again, all of these things are becoming more and more important in the COVID age that we are in today. So for all my board members out there, take a moment, take a deep breath. I know that when you volunteered to be on the board, you never in a million years thought you would be dealing with a pandemic. So first of all, thank you for being there. Someone's got to do the job, and I know it's not an easy job. So give yourselves a pat on the back. In many cases, you're literally making, life-saving decisions with the COVID pandemic, and we know it's not easy. So thank you for being there and for volunteering for your community. I'm going to cover some of the frequently asked questions that Castle has received as the pandemic has gone along. What fears and challenges are the communities having on the front lines, and how are the communities overcoming those challenges? So first of all, in the state of Florida, there is a state of emergency, and so the property management teams are considered essential service. So our teams are able to go to the sites and work. So what's happening is on all of our sites, the office, the property management office is closed, it's locked, it's not open for walk-ins. However, the teams are there, they are social distanced, and they're also working on rotating schedules. So we're limiting the number of people in the office, but we are there to manage the properties to make sure that the towers and the associations are running effectively and safely. And we are asking all residents to not just come to the office. If they try to come to the office, the door will be locked. We have a phone number on there that they can call, and we can make an appointment if it's a situation where it requires an appointment, and then the appropriate social distancing is implemented. A big question we get is amenities. What do we do? Fiona, what do we do with our amenities? And at this point, all of the Castle communities, for the most part, across the state have closed all amenities. Our general guidance is all amenities should be closed, and that includes both indoor, like fitness facilities, pools, and outdoor amenities, any playgrounds. I get that question a lot. They'll say, Fiona, we've closed, the pool and the gym, but we want to leave the tennis courts open or the bocce ball court open. Our guidance is everything should be closed, and those discussions should be had with the property management team on site, the board of directors, and the association's attorney. Another question we get is, can we limit vendors and guests coming onto property? Again, for those of you that are on the call that are boards of directors for the tower associations, that's even more important. And the answer is generally yes. Again, you need to check with your attorney. However, as a general guide for all of our associations, you can limit guests and vendors. So for example, what would be considered an essential vendor? If a resident has a hot water heater that's not working, a stove that's gone out, a fridge, a plumbing issue, those type of things would be considered emergencies. And the property manager would work with the homeowner and the vendor to ensure that we have everybody coming on site and following the proper protocols with the proper PPE, personal protective equipment. And The other question that we get a lot is, what do we do if we get a presumed case of COVID or a confirmed case of COVID? And that's obviously a big question. One of the things that Castle has done for the communities is we have prepared what's called a site response plan. For those of you that are on the phone in hurricane-prone areas, and for my my fellow Canadians that may be on the phone, it's probably similar. You have an emergency response plan for an ice storm or a major snowstorm. So it would be the same type of idea, but we have gone through for each of our associations and prepared a site response plan, or a playbook per se, that walks the associations through all of these what-if scenarios. And so as a general guide, there's a whole, that's a whole session in and of itself. But as a general guide, you should not go off of hearsay. You should go off of a valid report of a potential or confirmed case. So that would be either the homeowner themselves is contacting the management to say, hey, either I'm in the hospital, or I've gone to the doctor and I've been confirmed, or I've gone to the doctor and they've tested me, and I'm waiting for the results. But in that case, we would consider that a presumed case if they have been tested, because as we all know, tests are hard to come by. So theoretically, doctors are not testing people if they don't think there's a chance that they have it. So if you have a presumed or confirmed case, you should get with your management company, get with the board of directors and the attorney, all on a conference call, and walk through what the communication is going to be. We have sample letters that we would be happy to share with you as part of our plan as to what to send out to the residents. As a general rule, you cannot share the name of the person who's contracted COVID, but there are definitely protocols that you can follow. Communication is very important, as we've talked about so far. And one of the best practices we are following from a communication standpoint is doing weekly newsletters to the residents. And this newsletter is a positive newsletter. So it's talking about, click on this link, there's some virtual tours, maybe to museums or to different places around the world, free virtual workouts, guides on how to use technology, how to use Zoom, how to use House Party. There's a bunch of different apps out there. So we're trying to provide things for the residents to do while they are quarantined. We've also seen some great creative on-site events that our lifestyle directors at Castle have implemented. And again, these are very community specific, but just to give you some basic ideas, in our homeowners associations, they're doing happy hours, and they're doing them on their driveways with very strict social distancing guidelines. You have to stay on your driveway. We're also seeing a 8 a.m. or a morning pledge of allegiance to the flag on the driveways. Those are some nice things. We're having our lifestyle directors call our residents and try to get them connected in phone trees and Zoom calls. And then the other thing, the big question has been regarding meetings, and I know we've touched on that quite a bit, but essentially the associations do have, again in Florida, with a state of emergency, they have emergency powers that they can hold meetings quickly if they need to. The guidance obviously would be not to abuse that option and to only use it where it's absolutely necessary. And I can tell you, we've had very, very good success with doing online meetings. I know it sounds a bit overwhelming perhaps for some boards and the thought of doing online elections and everything else, but you've got the best of the best. With Peter and Ben on the call, they are great to walk you through. Doing the dry runs with the association is a lot of fun, quite frankly. And I think that you'll find that your residents truly will enjoy it and appreciate it. So I'm going to leave time for questions. Thanks again for having me, and I will turn it back over.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fiona and Ben. Appreciate the content. We've got quite a number of questions that have been posted here. So what I'll do is maybe I'll kick it off with just a couple of answers of the ones that are, I believe, relevant to Concierge Plus, and then maybe we can go down the line as well. So actually first, Glenn is asking, Glenn, first of all, comments, the information here is outstanding. Thank you very much, Glenn. Appreciate your positive feedback on that. How can I share this with other board members? So as I mentioned, we will be sending an email to all of the participants, whether you attended or just signed up and didn't attend, with a link to the webinar. So you'll be able to forward that on to your board member, to property managers, or to anyone else that you'd like to to have share that. I have a question here from Michelle. She's asking, does Concierge Plus and GetQuorum integrate together? Yes, absolutely. We work very well together and provide a seamless link between the two systems so that all the resident information flows seamlessly through to GetQuorum from Concierge Plus. And similarly, all of the results for opting into electronic communications and things like that are sent back to us, so you have a permanent record of that. Michael's asking, can I use your platform to share documents? Yes, absolutely. So Concierge Plus has a built-in module to share any kind of files or content that you want, even a virtual meeting or something like that. You can put that, you can load that into Concierge Plus and make that available to residents. And as an added benefit, I mean, that's how you get a lot of the cost savings and the time savings as a property manager. Is you're going to have over time residents going to leverage those resources automatically by themselves, self-service, instead of picking up the phone and calling you or emailing you or coming by your office. Greg says we use, actually there's two related questions here. We use another solution, Constant Contact, for email blasts, but we're not satisfied. It doesn't seem to do all the things that you mentioned. And then there's another question here. Our Chicago management company, which I won't name the name here, provides a solution similar to yours. Should I continue to use yours, or should I continue to use theirs, or switch to something like Concierge Plus? So those are great questions. One of the big benefits of Concierge Plus is that we are purpose-built for condominiums and for HOAs. Our technology is not something that is also used by corporations or things like that in unrelated markets. We've specifically built our platform over 20 years and continue to improve our platform specific to the needs of associations. So everything in our platform is about associations. Software like Constant Contact is great for setting up email blasts, but you're absolutely right. You're not going to have a live link to your resident database, for example. I don't believe you can facilitate phone calls being made to residents with a solution like Constant Contact. So you've got to understand that taking off-the-shelf technology that is meant for a whole wide variety of purposes can be useful, but oftentimes you're going to find very big technological gaps in what the platform can do. And sort of segueing to the other question here, some property management companies do offer some kind of a built-in solution with their platform. There are pros and cons to that. The obvious benefit is that often they don't charge for that. So you might be saving a couple $1,000s, a few $1,000s a year by leveraging their solution. But the one big thing that I've come to learn over the years is the data that you acquire using any of these solutions, whether it's Constant Contact, our solution, or a management company solution, that's your valuable data, right? So all the service requests, all of the documents that you've loaded, the history of announcements of who's read, who's engaged in any of these things, discussion forums, all the history and of how your amenities are being used, all the packages that are being logged with all the digital signatures, that's really the corporation, the condo corporation's data. And that is something that you need to retain permanently, right? And the reality is that folks do in condo associations change management companies. If you are using a proprietary system from a property management company, the odds are that when you switch to another property management company in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it doesn't matter, you're going to lose access to that. And just the way that you wouldn't want to lose access to any of the other information that the condo association has, you likely don't want to lose access to that as well. And then the last question here, Ming Yang is asking, does Concierge Plus include accounting capabilities? So we don't actually directly include accounting capabilities in our platform. What we've done is, generally a property management company will use a property management accounting package Tops, Yardi, Caliber, Sync, Genarch, I mean, the list goes on. What we do is we actually have a seamless integration with basically all of these companies. So all of your resident information, all of the owner information, all of the ledger, all of that accounting stuff, all of that is brought into to Concierge Plus, and all of your resident owners can see information relating to that. There's a lot of customization. We can walk you through that if you have any other questions relating to that. And just as a side note, a lot of self-managed associations use a platform like QuickBooks. We also integrate with that, so you can link all of the information and have it be seamlessly updated, both in our platform and in the management company side. So that is, I think, the questions that are relating to us. There's a general question here about cost and fees. I'm not sure whether that's a question for Concierge Plus or one of the other two panelists. The costs vary. We typically charge by the number of units in an association. I would encourage you to get in touch with us, and we can certainly find a package or a plan that would be within the budget of your condo association as well. Ben, can I turn it over to you for some of these other questions?
Sure, that'd be great. Can you guys hear me okay, Peter? Maybe a thumbs up? Awesome. Okay, so I will do this as quickly as I can to make sure Fiona has some time as well. Jackie asked, Ben, are proxies recognized in every state? We've actually analyzed just over 26 different states and did not find a single one that prohibited the use of electronic proxies and or electronic ballots. You may require bylaws. It may be expressly permitted, depends on where you are. Give us a call, send me an email, happy to review that with you. Sean asks, what about the concern that not everyone can participate if they don't have technology or not comfortable with it? It's a very fair question. It's a very fair concern. You should also note that using a electronic voting and using a virtual meeting does not preclude participation via paper-based ballot or paper-based secret ballot or proxy, pardon me. So owners that are unable to attend the meeting virtually, having a tough morning, obviously, are able to participate using the traditional means, but it is certainly something to be aware of when you're deciding to host a virtual meeting. If you're doing virtual voting, George asks, how can you make sure that only one of the owners of a property registers so you don't get 2 or more people voting in a house? Awesome question. That is actually a jurisdictionally complex question. So for example, in the province of Ontario, the last ballot submitted or the last electronic proxy submitted is valid. So if the husband submits on Monday, the wife submits on Tuesday, then it's the wife's proxy. By comparison, in the state of Florida, before you may participate in an electronic vote, you must sign a voting certificate, which designates which member of the household may vote. In the state of Texas, it is the last vote properly submitted stands. So it will vary, but our system is built to accommodate for all these different permutations. Paul asked, am I stating that a state law may override HOA bylaws? That is to say, an HOA may conduct a Zoom board meeting and vote without bylaw changes. I am most certainly not stating that. I am not a lawyer. You're merely highlighting that in the state of Florida, that is likely the case. To make a decision like that, you should always be working in conjunction with your legal counsel. And I believe that is more or less all of the answers that are applicable to GetQuorum. If I haven't answered directly, I will be reaching out by email the next day or so. Fiona, I will hand it off to you.
Thanks, Ben. So I think I've got most of the questions answered in our Q&A. There was one remaining, and it was specific to furniture deliveries. Should furniture deliveries be postponed? So again, depending on where you are and in the world, because I know we have an international audience here, I can tell you for most of Florida in a state of emergency, if you were in a tower, the answer would be yes, that furniture deliveries would be postponed, not considered an emergency or essential. Every situation is unique though, so I would again encourage you, if you have any doubt, check with your association attorney, because guidance really should be going out to the entire building regarding what is essential and what isn't essential. So that was it for me. Thanks everybody. I appreciate you having me on, and please stay safe.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I wanted to extend my personal thanks once again to Fiona and Ben for participating in the webinar today, and to all of you guys for for tuning in. As I said at the beginning, there will be an email version of this that is sent to all of you guys. There are actually more questions that are coming in, so some of those will be followed up with you guys by email separately. Thank you. Stay safe, everyone. Wash your hands.